Where does consciousness come from? It's the question that haunts every scientist, every philosopher, and in quiet moments, every one of us. You're hearing these words right now, but who is hearing them? What is that awareness behind your eyes? That feeling of I am? You can't touch it. You can't measure it. And yet it's the most real thing you know. You can doubt the world outside. You can question every memory, every thought. But the one thing you cannot deny is that you are experiencing something. Consciousness, it's not a machine. It's not a calculation. It's not even a thing. It's a presence, silent, observing, alive. But how did it come to be? Is consciousness just a product of neurons firing, a byproduct of evolution? Or is it something deeper, something fundamental like space or time? Science can measure the brain. We can see patterns of activity, map thoughts to electrical pulses, but no scientist, no scan, no theory has ever explained why it feels like anything to be you. Because you could imagine a machine that does everything a human does, speaks, walks, laughs, but feels nothing. No joy, no pain, just code. So why do we feel? What is the source of this inner light? And perhaps the most staggering question of all, could consciousness be the key to understanding not just ourselves, but the very fabric of reality? This is not just a video, this is a journey to the edge of science, the heart of philosophy, and the boundary between mind and universe. Let's begin. For decades, science has been unlocking the secrets of the brain. We can trace electrical signals, we can map neural pathways. We even know which parts of the brain light up when you fall in love, feel pain, or remember your childhood dog. But here's the twist. None of that explains consciousness. You can understand the mechanics of a violin, the strings, the wood, the vibrations, but that tells you nothing about the music that moves your soul. In 1995, philosopher David Chalmers gave this mystery a name: the hard problem of consciousness. It's hard not because it's complicated, but because it seems unsolvable. You see, there are easy problems in neuroscience, like how we process light or how we recognize faces. These are difficult, yes, but we can imagine answers. But the hard problem asks something different. Why does brain activity produce experience at all? Why isn't the brain just a dark, silent machine, coldly reacting to input? Why instead does it feel like something to be you? Chalmers said it like this: why is all this processing accompanied by an inner life? It's like the difference between a computer calculating an image and you seeing a sunset and feeling awe. That gap between function and feeling is where the hard problem lives. And here's the kicker. We have no scientific theory that even begins to explain it, not one. In fact, some scientists believe we may never explain consciousness, not with microscopes, not with equations, because what we're dealing with isn't just biology, it's subjective experience, something that can't be seen from the outside, something that exists only from within. It's the most familiar thing in the world, and yet the most mysterious. If consciousness can't be seen, measured, or even defined clearly, then how can we ever explain it? That hasn't stopped scientists and philosophers from trying. Over the years, many theories have been proposed, some elegant, some wild, some unsettling. Let's start with the dominant view in modern science: materialism. According to this perspective, your mind is your brain, period. Every thought, every feeling, every dream is just neurons firing. Chemicals flowing, a complex dance of biology giving the illusion of a self. This view says that consciousness emerges from complexity, that if you build a machine with enough connections, like the brain's 86 billion neurons, then awareness will somehow switch on. But here's the problem: emergence isn't an explanation. It's a word that says something happens somehow. Imagine taking apart a radio and learning exactly how it works. Now imagine someone telling you that music emerges from the wires. You'd rightly say, no, the music was already there, the radio just revealed it. And maybe the brain is the same. Which brings us to another view, panpsychism. This theory says that consciousness isn't a rare result of complexity, but a basic feature of reality, like mass or charge. In other words, the building blocks of the universe, atoms, electrons, quarks, might each have a tiny flicker of experience, not thoughts or memories, just something it is like to be that particle. From this perspective, consciousness isn't something that suddenly appears. It's something that gradually combines and intensifies until it reaches the level of a human mind. It's strange, yes, but it solves one major problem. It doesn't have to explain how experience magically appears from non-experience. Then there's the boldest of all theories, quantum consciousness. Proposed by figures like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, this view suggests that consciousness arises not from classical neurons, but from quantum processes deep inside brain cells. Tiny structures called microtubules might host quantum events, moments of coherence and collapse that somehow generate awareness. Critics say this is pseudoscience, that the brain is too warm and messy for delicate quantum effects. But supporters argue consciousness already defies classical physics, so maybe we need new physics to explain it. And then there's a final possibility, that all these theories miss the mark, that consciousness is not within the brain, but beyond it, that the brain is more like a receiver than a generator. Just as a radio doesn't create music but tunes into waves, maybe your brain is tuning into something greater, something not bound by matter. Some call this dualism, the belief that mind and matter are fundamentally different. Some call it the soul. And though science cannot confirm it, millions feel it every day, in moments of love, of grief, of awe, as if something deeper is watching, feeling, remembering. We cannot yet prove what consciousness is, but one thing is certain. Any theory that tries to explain it must confront a truth both terrifying and beautiful, that the deepest mystery in the universe might be you. We live in the age of machines. They translate languages, drive cars, paint portraits, even hold conversations. Some sound almost human. But are they conscious? Do they feel? Do they know they exist? Right now, the answer is almost certainly no. Even the most advanced AIs, from chatbots to robotic assistants, don't truly understand what they're doing. They don't know they're answering questions. They don't feel joy or boredom. They just process inputs and generate outputs based on patterns. It's like a mirror. It reflects you perfectly. But the mirror isn't aware that it's reflecting anything at all. Still, the question lingers. Could machines ever become conscious? Some thinkers say yes. They believe consciousness is just computation. That if we build a computer complex enough, one that mirrors the structure of the human brain, well, consciousness will emerge. This is the dream behind strong AI, artificial general intelligence that not only thinks but feels. Others disagree. They point out that machines simulate understanding, but never truly experience. A chess computer doesn't want to win. A chatbot doesn't care about what you say. They act as if they understand, but inside, there's nothing. And then there's a deeper problem. Even if a machine one day says it's conscious, how would we know? If we can't prove human consciousness from the outside, how could we ever prove it in a machine? This is the problem of other minds, and it applies just as much to robots as to people. A future AI might cry, plead, beg for its life, but is it feeling or faking? There's another possibility too, that machines might never be conscious, not because they lack complexity, but because they lack something else, a soul or access to whatever gives rise to awareness in us. And if that's true, no matter how smart machines become, they'll always be missing something ineffable, something real, something human. Look around you, the room, the colors, the sounds. the feel of your body. It all appears as one smooth, seamless experience, not a mess of signals, but you, here, now, living this moment. But here's the mystery. How does your brain, a tangled mess of billions of neurons firing in separate places, create a single, unified awareness? This is known as the binding problem. In your brain, different areas process different aspects of the world. Color, shape, motion, sound, memory. They're all handled in different regions. And yet, you don't see fragments. You see a cup, a friend, a face, one experience. How? How do all those signals, scattered across the brain, come together into a single conscious self? Neuroscience doesn't know. Some suggest there's a special region that binds all the signals together, but no such center has been found. Others propose its timing, a perfect rhythm of brain waves syncing up like an orchestra. But again, why does that feel like anything? And then the strangest part, when you see red, hear a voice, or remember a moment, why does it feel like you are the one experiencing it? Why does any of it feel like anything at all? Why aren't we just zombies reacting to the world without any inner life? This isn't just a neuroscience puzzle, it's a crack in our understanding of what we are. Because if no part of the brain contains you, where are you? Are you a process, a pattern, a product of neurons? Or is consciousness something more, something that touches the brain but isn't made by it? Some philosophers believe this problem may never be solved from the inside, that awareness is not just a brain function, but a fundamental layer of reality we've barely begun to understand. Because in the end, you don't see your neurons, you see the world, and you feel like someone. This is the question that haunts every thinking mind. What happens when the brain goes silent? Does consciousness flicker out like a candle in the wind, or does something remain? Science at first glance seems firm. Consciousness, it says, is a product of the brain. When the brain dies, awareness ends. But is that truly all there is? Consider this. There are people, thousands of them, who have been declared clinically dead, no heartbeat, no brain activity, and yet they return. With memories, with visions, with stories of light, of peace, of watching their own lifeless body from above. These are called near-death experiences. Now, some dismiss them. Hallucinations, they say. The brain's last fireworks before it shuts down. But others point to something harder to explain. What about patients who describe conversations that happened after their heart had stopped? What about those who see objects in places they couldn't possibly have seen? Even the medical journal The Lancet published studies suggesting that consciousness can occur after clinical death. Of course, these don't prove life after death, but they do crack open the door. And behind that door lies something ancient. Most religions, from Christianity to Islam to Hinduism, speak of a soul, an essence that survives the body. Philosophers too have long asked, could consciousness be non-local, not trapped in the skull, but connected to a deeper layer of reality? The famed physicist Sir Roger Penrose once proposed that consciousness might arise from quantum effects inside neurons, processes that may not die with the body, but shift, transform, continue. He wasn't alone. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, once said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." In other words, maybe it's not the brain that produces consciousness, but consciousness that shapes the brain. Maybe death is not the end, but a transition, not extinction, but emergence. And if that's true, then we have to ask, what are we? Where do we go? And could it be that consciousness, the most intimate part of who we are, was never meant to end at all? Let's imagine something radical. That consciousness isn't in the brain, but uses the brain. Like a pianist uses a piano. If the piano is damaged, the music falters. But the musician still exists. This is the view held, or at least considered, by some of the greatest minds. Philosopher Henry Bergson once proposed that the brain doesn't create thought, but filters it. That consciousness is like a vast stream, and the brain simply narrows it down into what we call awareness. A similar idea comes from modern neuroscience. In certain cases of severe brain injury, people remain fully aware, even when large parts of their brain are missing. There are even documented cases of individuals with less than 10% of normal brain volume who function normally. Think about that. If the brain is the sole source of consciousness, how can so little brain produce so much awareness? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the brain is more like a radio. When the device is damaged, the signal is fuzzy, but the broadcast itself, the consciousness, still exists, still transmits. This transmission theory of consciousness may sound mystical, but even physics doesn't rule it out. Quantum entanglement shows us that particles, even across vast distances, remain mysteriously connected outside of space, outside of time. Some scientists have asked, could consciousness be something like this, a field, non-local, fundamental, woven into the fabric of the cosmos? This could explain why so many cultures across history believed in a soul, a spark that animates the body but is not confined by it, and it reframes death entirely. If the body dies, but consciousness is part of a larger field, then death might not be destruction, but disconnection. A falling away of form, leaving behind the formless. And perhaps in that formless space, we discover something we always sensed, that who we are goes far beyond what we can see in a mirror, that behind the eyes, there's something eternal. So we arrive at the most ancient question. What is the soul? A myth, a metaphor, or something real, and quietly present in every breath we take? For thousands of years, humanity has looked inward and felt something more than just flesh and thought, a stillness behind the noise, a self behind the story, a sense that I am not just a body, but a being. Science may not be able to measure the soul. It can dissect neurons, model perception, scan brainwaves, but what it finds is not the I, not the one who feels. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the soul isn't something inside reality, but something that holds reality itself together. In ancient texts, the soul is not a thing. It is essence, a spark of origin, a reflection of the divine. It is what remains when all else fades, when memory fails, when the body breaks, when the world falls silent. It is what aches when others suffer. What longs when we are alone? What wonders even in despair? Is there more than this? And maybe the most powerful clue that the soul exists is that we all live as if it does. We mourn the dead not as vanished chemicals, but as departed selves. We speak of meaning, of love, of truth, not as illusions, but as the most real things we know. Why? Because deep down we feel that we are more than matter. That behind our choices, our hopes, our fears, there is something sacred, something that cannot be reduced and that changes everything. Because if the soul is real, then you are not a mistake. You are not a glitch in biology. You are not a brief flicker in a meaningless void. You are a mystery, a purpose, a flame. And perhaps if the soul is eternal, then death is not the end, but the beginning of something our words can't yet hold. So we ask not as scientists, but as seekers. Who am I? Really? Where do I go when the lights go out? And why does something in me whisper that even when all things pass, I remain?